Good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody that's checking in. I'm seeing a couple of names that I'm familiar with. Thank you for joining us. As you come in, and you might be already familiar with the process that we usually do for this, please let us know in the chat your name and which organization you are joining us from. It will be useful as we settle down and get ourselves prepped for this session. So as you come in, please let us know your name and where you're dialing in from, where you're calling from. And you're welcome to say hello to the rest of the group as we prep for our session to start. So here we go. Georgina is here. Georgina is from CFO. Good to see you. And she's made that clear. When you do tell us where you are, select all panelists and attendees. All the panelists and all the attendees. As you come in, tell us where you are by writing in the chat. Select all panelists and attendees. And we'll be getting underway pretty shortly. Okay, hi Julia. Hi Kalobe. Yep, people are very timeless, and this is quite impressive. I like that. I like the start we're already having, and I think this is a very an important session that you're jumping onto. It's Sage Insights. We're trying to unpack the 2021 budget. If that's what you signed up for, you're definitely in the right place. But if this is the wrong webinar, stick around. Maybe you might learn a couple of things today. Marius, good morning, Marius Kraling, TFS, morning, Cheryl. Okay, we're gonna give it a few more minutes as people trickle in. As you come in, again, let us know in your chat your name and where you're dialing from, which organization, perhaps even throw in a city. It'll be interesting as we settle down and select all panelists and attendees as you write that message. We'll be shortly taking it away. How's it, Mohammed? I must be careful to use the right terms. I think we've got an optimal amount of people for us to get things underway. We're really trying to see if we can get this packed session today into the 1 hour that we have. So with that, I wanted to kick us off. But before I start with the introductions of my panelists, I just want to advise you, if you want to, as you come in, tell us, select all panelists and attendees. So select the all panelists and attendees if you want to write a message so that it goes to everybody who's in attendance. And then write us a message. Tell us your name and which organization you're coming from. That'll help us. All panelists and attendees, please. That'll be great. Thank you, Abigail. Okay. So good morning, everybody. This is long awaited. It was the hotly anticipated budget by our Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni. And today I'm joined by two professionals to unpack this, the 2021 budget brought to you by Sage. And we're calling it How Tech Can Help Finance Respond to the Changes. So with me, I am joined by Yolandi Esterhuizen. She's Director of Product Compliance from Sage and is a registered tax practitioner as well. So it's good to have you, Yolandi. Good morning.
Good morning, Brian. Thanks for having me, and good morning to all the delegates and the attendees. I'm very excited about this morning's session.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, thank you. And also, I'm also joined on this panel by Gerhard Hartman. He's the Vice President of Media and Business for Sage Africa and the Middle East, and he's going to help us give us some nuggets and insights on how businesses can use technology and become more agile to respond to the financial landscape that we've been presented with. Good morning, Gerhard.
Morning, Brian. Good morning. Great to be here, and great to see so many delegates attending. And I saw some of the customer names using Sage products already. So great to see our customers on the call as well.
Excellent. So we are in good company. Welcome to everybody else. My name is Brian Chiveria. I'm the community manager for CFOs Africa, particularly taking care of the CFOs. And we hope to continue to build this community by having sessions like this one that we are bringing to today. So I'm really excited. And with that, I wanted to kind of kick us off. And I wanted to start off with a quick poll, a poll that will give us a sense of, one, did you watch or listen to the budget at all, right? And also just to get a sense of where everybody is. So I'm going to launch a poll quickly, and if you can, please, can you start answering the questions as you see them? As they come up, if you're having any challenges, let me know in the chat. So the poll would have come up. There we go. So the first question, what surprised you most about the budget 2021? You've got a couple of questions there. So tell us what your thoughts are. That's the first question. I see people have already started answering pretty quickly. The second question is, how easily does your organization or perhaps your finance team respond to changes around the budget? And you got a few options there. A few surprises I'm seeing already with some of the responses there, but that's okay. This is a safe space. We've got experts with us, so hopefully we can delve in these and other issues. The third question is, do you use a technology solution to streamline your business? It would be good to kind of know. So, about half of our attendees have already responded to the questions. I'll give a few more minutes, a couple more minutes for for everybody else to give us what they think. I probably should have had a question. The first question should have been, did you listen to the budget speech at all, right? So that could have been interesting before we went into the detail of it. But I guess we've got a well-learned audience with us, and people are answering to the best of their knowledge. So we're close to some 60, 70 odd percent. Given the time that a very short space of time that we have today, if you want to post a question, we will have a Q&A slot around about 11:45 to 12 noon, where people can ask questions. But if you have a pressing question that based on any responses that we get during the session, please feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll see if we can address it or pick it up and address it at a certain point. We'll see how the session kind of goes. Okay, I think we've done relatively well. I'm just waiting for, hopefully we can cross that line. A few more people have jumped in. If you've just jumped in, we've got a poll live. If you can answer the 3 questions that we've posted for you, highly appreciate that. So once again, the first question is, what surprised you the most about the budget? Select your answer from the options provided. Hopefully we want to get close to 80% completion on this poll. And we're doing perfectly. The second question is, how easily does your organization or your finance team or both respond to changes around budget time? And the third question is, do you use technology solution to streamline your business? A technology solution to streamline your business. This is perhaps mostly, I'm assuming most of people will say yes to that, but let's see. Let us see. If you're just joining us, I see some people who just joined us. Tell us your name, where you're dialing in from, and your organization, and select all panelists and attendees, please. Okay, good. I am gonna call it now for the poll so we can quickly move along. I think we've got a decent response rate on our poll. We're sitting at just around 80%, so I think that is pretty good. A few more seconds, and this is the end of the poll. Thank you. Right, so to kind of start us off, I'm going to come to you, Yolandi, with some questions. I know that the corporate tax rate was significantly reduced. It's a big talking point. Do you believe that overall, that reduction will translate in any kind of benefits for big business, even small business?
Brian, you know what? I think we're going into the right direction. We have a high corporate tax rate in comparison to the rest of the world. And I mean, I actually thought that a relief of a lower corporate tax rate would be postponed way further, because the measures to broaden the corporate tax rate was postponed to at least the 1st of January 2022. So that was quite surprising that we actually had a date given in the budget speech for next year. So I think, yes, it's 1%, but it was also mentioned that this is the starting point, and they'll look at ways on how it can still be further reduced. I think any savings at this point in time for company, big or small, definitely will relate to, or will provide some relief. So definitely a step into the right direction.
Oh, okay, awesome. You mentioned a date there. In terms of a date, how important is that? I mean, if you're coming from business, to get some clarity, especially when we're living in a time of COVID, how important to you as Sage, and how do you feel about that?
About the date, it's just to make sure that you applied correctly. So it was mentioned that it was for businesses with years of assessment commencing or on or after the 1st of April 2022. So it's just to make sure that it provides you a bit of time, in the sense that you can project cost for costing purposes, etc., planning purposes, in terms of cash flow, etc. That is when it can be factored in. So that will be only from next year onwards that they will actually get this relief. But obviously a date is very important, because that tells us when we can look forward to something, or at which point in time we can actually feel a bit of relief. Yeah,
and I'm very relieved when it comes to dates, especially in COVID, right? Where every date has always changed left and right. Gerhard, I want to come to you quickly and perhaps just build on some of that. Given these kind of announcements, tell us, you're speaking from the business side of things as a leader who's contact with business. What has been keeping them up at night, since this budget's announced?
Yeah, I want to take it back a year ago. I think a lot of everyone on the call, being finance leaders, has been up at night since last year, more or less this time. I mean, we had a discussion yesterday internally, and we said it's nearly a year ago, which we had our first case of COVID in South Africa, and then after that, quite a number of lockdowns, having a massive impact on business. And I think, I mean, that for me, being a business owner or even being a finance leader, is that is what's keeping me up at night. What is next? How can we plan better? How can we secure our future to make sure we have a company that produces goods to customers, or have a company that employ people? And for me, if we need to summarize it, it's managing your finances. It's managing your business strategy. And obviously from a Sage perspective, we're there to help and support medium and small organizations. That's why we've got financial management software. That's why we've got payroll software, and a number of companies in South Africa are using it. And again, come back to keeping you up at night. As we started with a budget speech, we spoke about what some of the announcements were, but compliancy for any type of business, you need to be compliant. You need to pay what is due to government, whether it's tax, UIF, or your skills levies. And part of that is to make sure that you have the systems in place. And again, systems are there and software solutions are there to make you hopefully sleep a little bit better at night, even though you still need to make sure you adhere to your business strategy and manage that on a day-to-day or quarter-to-quarter basis.
All right, awesome. I'll come back to you on that. I mean, you started to relay some of the things that businesses can do, but I'll come back to that. I just want to go back to Yolandi quickly and just unpack the budget in terms of do you think is the rationale for the lack of major tax hikes for businesses and individuals in the coming year?
So last year we had a projected loss of 312 billion rand. So obviously that made us worried and think that there would be definitely tax increases all over. So with the loss, we knew we had to fund vaccines, so we had to get the money somewhere. But with that being said, we also knew that putting more pressure on individuals and companies in terms of taxes would negatively affect our economic growth or our economy overall. So I think it was very hard for the minister to make, National Treasury to make those calls in terms of what is the perfect balance between reducing spending, still provide a bit of tax relief to individuals and companies. And obviously what I think helped overall was the fact that we collected 100 billion more than what we expected. So obviously that helped with the fact that, or with the plans that were put in place. So yeah, I think it was a good balance in terms of, overall the pockets aren't affected as much as it could have been. So I think all South Africans in a way is, relieved in a certain way. Yes, there are some areas like the fuel levies, etc., that will impact them still. But in terms of the VAT that was not increased, personal income tax rates weren't increased. So overall, I think a sense of relief, and that was obviously a good balance because we know it was necessary for our economic growth.
Okay, excellent. And Gerhard, coming back to you and just building up on what Yolandi has said, and you started really to kind of allude on this. And so what are the steps? What is the first steps essentially that the company should really take at the start of a tax year, which is like yesterday?
Yes, so it comes down for me to obviously the type of business, the specific industry you're in, and you ask where do you start? And for me, again, I'm going to use what happened a year ago versus where we are today, but companies that embrace technology I'm going to give it a name, companies that adapted and digitally transformed their businesses a year ago, we're in a better place today. We've seen it, we've interacted with those companies. Yes, a lot of pressure with lockdown, etc. But companies that didn't embrace technology struggled. What do I mean by that? Practical example. We went into a lockdown. You can't get to your office. You can't access normal information you expected to access. And all of a sudden, everything is virtual. I mean, even today, we're having a virtual meeting. Maybe in the past, we would have got together at a certain venue and saw one another face to face. But companies that had the potential to immediately shift into a virtual environment were at a better stand. Now, yes, it's again important per industry. I mean, if you're in manufacturing, you can't just go virtual. Who's going to run and manufacture the product? So it was, I want to say, different adjustments for different industries. So back to the question of when do you need to start? Part of your strategy, start immediately. Have a look. If you are using certain, I want to say, manual functions in your business, have a conversation about how can we automate it? How can we make it better? What is a small step we can take into managing, let's say, our finances better? Now, maybe it's very simplistic, and I know there's a lot of CFOs and finance leaders on the call, but again, the question is, how can technology assist your business to make a process better? And that's the crux. That's where you need to start investing in, and that's what you need to review. And I firmly believe, as business owners, finance leaders, you need to take that leap. You need to believe that technology can add value to your business, and you put that strategy in place. If you've put the strategy in place already to adapt or digitally transform, evaluate it consistently, because the way you did business a year ago versus the way you do business today is completely different. And that's key for me, is to embrace and evaluate. And entire time, don't venture onto a massive or too big a project and expect too many things too fast. Make it realistic. Because if it's a realistic goal and you believe what I'm telling you, that technology will add value, you want to see that return. As an employee or stakeholder into that process, you want to feel part of it and you want to see a return on it. And if you don't take people on that journey, you're going to lose them and potentially your project can fail. But from an industry point of view, what we've seen, again, companies embracing technology at this stage is helping them. They're seeing the return, whether it's managing your finances, automating a process, better manage your staff or your employees. All of those companies embracing technology is evolving and spending their time on more critical areas in their business.
All right, awesome. And you know, there's Yolandi, I think you wanted to come in.
Yes, I just wanted to say, add to what Gerhard was saying, and I absolutely agree. I mean, I think that what the pandemic has taught us is technology is a central part of our economy. I mean, we couldn't have operated the past year, and obviously not all industries, but if it wasn't for technology. But and that's the world that we're moving towards. We have to embrace it, but we're not the only ones. We've seen, and just to get back to the actual budget speech, 3 billion rand was allocated to SARS to upgrade their technology. We know they're on a Vision 2024 project, which they will focus on technology and AI, etc., to pick up certain trends, to get data from third parties, etc. So we're all on this train together, and if you're either on it or you're going to get behind. So I just wanted to add that to what Gerhard was saying.
So in terms of technology, we're pretty much saying goodbye. You know, they used to call it work-life balance, and now we're in work-life integration, isn't it? It's we got to integrate the technology into pretty much our day-to-day lives. And with that, you know, I'll go back to you, Yolandi. There was an announcement that was, you know, that Treasury will be relooking the current travel office and, you know, and the home office, the travel and the home office allowances, right? Do you think that companies need to recalculate deductions for the employees?
Well, it's a bit premature to recalculate, or to say companies would have to recalculate. So it was welcoming that it was mentioned that Treasury will relook at the tax treatment of home offices and travel allowances. Now that we're forced to work from home, and we know that there are quite stringent rules in place to be able to claim home office tax deductions. So it would be hard to say what they're planning, and then we'll obviously have to wait for draft legislation. But we'll see if they actually provide for a tax exemption, for example, where the allowance that the employer is paying, maybe a portion might be tax or exempt from tax, or whether they will just relax the rules in order for tax deductions to be claimed. For example, I mean, currently you can only claim a tax deduction for a home office if you use the area primarily and specifically for purposes of trade. So for your employment, for example, and it must be specifically equipped for your purposes of trade. So it must be a separate area in your house that you have to use. You can't just sit at your dining room table or use the study as a kids' playroom, etc. So, and I think especially now where they're forced to relook at the rules, because a lot of people are now working from home and not everybody is privileged enough to have a separate area. They're definitely welcoming. It's just hard to say what they're planning, and that will only be in the draft legislation. So when that is actually then published, then they can see whether they have to, you know, whether they can restructure packages, for example, to make it better for the employees, or start paying allowances if they haven't done so before, etc. So we'll only see then.
Can employees play a part in this, Yolandi? And I'll come to you, Gerhard. What can we do as employees to get ourselves ready, you know, with this potential change? You know, a lot of people are sitting at dinner tables right now.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. That is why it was mentioned, because there is a specific need for the rules to be reviewed. So now we can't do much, as we can hope that there's a massive tax exemption or tax relief, but until the draft legislation is published, we won't know exactly what to do or what to expect. So we do what we have to do. If you work from home, at this point in time, you have to comply to the rules before you can claim, but we'll see in the legislation.
Gerhard, you had a comment?
So Brian, you touched on something interesting. You mentioned work-life balance, and then you mentioned and said, yes, but you working long hours, etc. And again, if we look back, when you were in an office environment, you let's say had fixed hours. And now, being in a virtual environment, how do you stop yourself? When do you start? When do you end? I mean, if I speak to customers and colleagues internally, etc., they always say, but all of a sudden, we're just always online. There's never a break. Now, again, talking about work-life balance, for you as leaders in an organization, you need to set that example. You cannot be 12 hours virtual, week in, week out. You're going to burn out. And we've seen in workforces that there is burnout. And we need to manage and bring back the work-life balance. I want to say, if you've got your area where you're working in, you need to be able to shut that door and don't go back to it tonight at 6 o'clock and spend some time with the family. I think it's very important, because the lines are so blurred, because everything happens, let's say, in the same space even though we're virtually connected. And that's part of the digital transformation journey. It's going to influence policies, etc. But again, what it also created, it created the opportunity to remotely or to connect to cloud solutions. We're on Zoom today, whether it's Teams, it's all solutions that get used. And the same for the software to manage your company better, is you're going to have a cloud solution in place. And we've recently launched a product called Sage Intacct, which is a fantastic financial management tool. And there's a lot of CEOs on the call, and I want them to go and look at it. It's new technology. It manages your finances end to end. And what's the value? Is to make life easier. Otherwise, why do you use technology? And for me, work-life balance with technology policies in place, or working policies in place, is very important.
And I like that. I mean, I like where you're going with the technology piece, because and that's why I put the work-life balance situation, right? Is, tell us more. What else could, technology support businesses at large, or CFOs or finance teams, to take compliance as as articulated in the balance in the budget statement seriously? How can technology really support us, Gerhard?
So again, I mentioned it earlier on, is compliance very important. When you look at it, I'm going to use a general example. When you go on this journey of looking for technology to automate in your business, compliance is key. It doesn't help you invest in technology and at the end of the day, you're not compliant with legislation, whether it's corporate legislation, whether it's individual legislation, you need to be compliant. It's as a corporate entity, as a business, that's your, I want to say, your that's your part contributing towards business in South Africa. You need to be compliant. Also very important is you need to make sure that the technology is going to work for you. So make sure you engage with service providers that can fulfill your project. Do your investigations, whether you need to research or tender or whatever it is, but do your research thoroughly and select a partner that can execute on service, but that has got a good product that is going to be relevant for years to come. Sometimes it happens, companies invest and tomorrow the technology is not available anymore. It influences the way you do business. Make sure you do your research properly. And then obviously further to that is business change. The way we did business last year versus this year is different. So make sure it can adapt with your change. And then insight into your business. Dynamic reporting, real-time reporting, analysis, I want to say compiling all your financial reporting that you need to have. And again, it's different, I want to say, focus areas depending on what the industry is. And I think that's the beauty of Intact, is it's verticalized. So if you're in financial services, it supports that vertical end to end. But that's very important, is look at where your business fits in and what your requirements are. And lastly, which is for me always the most important one, and it comes back to work-life balance. Take the employees or the people running the project on the journey with you. As CFOs, as leaders. I mean, CFOs are not just managing the finance kitty anymore. They're putting down the strategy of where we need to go with technology. Yes, in conjunction with the CIO or the IT leaders in the organization, but take the people that will be using this technology on the path to make it a successful project. And I think those 5 things I've mentioned, those 5 guidelines, is something that everyone can associate with, and that if you go by them, you should have that success and seeing the return on your investment you make in technology.
All right, thanks for that, Gerhard. Yolandi, I want to go back to tax quickly, and let's talk UIF, right? I mean, there was an increased contribution ceiling that was mentioned. How do you think that will impact, firstly, employers, and secondly, the employees?
So there was a proposal in the budget speech to increase the contributions earnings limit from 14,872 to 17,712 Rand. So what it basically just means, and a UIF contribution is 1% for both the employer and the employee. So that is the maximum amount the 1% can be calculated on. So if currently the maximum contribution is just over 148 Rand per month, so say you earn 20,000 Rand a month, you will only contribute 148 Rand per month towards UIF, and then obviously the employer too. And now the maximum the proposal was to increase the maximum. So the maximum that we will be able to contribute then is 177 Rand. An interesting spin on things it was proposed in the budget speech with an effective date of the 1st of March this year. And then basically there was only a notice published later on that it was still open, obviously, for public comment. So the effective date is now still, it's postponed basically till after public comments have closed. So we're not applying it now, we will only later on. But to get back to how it will affect everyone, obviously the bottom line, if you think it's almost 30 Rand per person per month, take that over 12 months. If you have 10,000 employees, then obviously it will affect your costs, etc., and your bottom line. But it's important, and that's the thing. These are announcements in the budget speech, but we need to take into account all other things. It's not just UIF. There are changes that were in the legislation that is obviously not mentioned in the budget speech. And I want to get back to what Gerhard was saying. It's about compliance, but it's also not, if there's a change to, let's say, payroll or HR, it doesn't just affect the HR or payroll department in isolation. It affects the costs of the company and the actual bottom line. So I think, CFOs need to know of the legislation changes, because that will ultimately affect their planning. How will this 30 Rand per person for, let's say, 10,000 employees, how will it affect us? It's not just a payroll change. Something else that I thought of, is the national minimum wage. Have we applied the national minimum wage, which is effective now? That will have an impact on cost. Something that has also now increased since 2014, if I remember correctly, is what they call the earnings threshold in terms of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. And that basically just means that there's a certain threshold, and if somebody earns above that threshold, you don't have to pay overtime anymore. So sometimes it's seen as an HR thing, but it can affect the bottom line. So we need to take note of all these changes, not just what's in the budget speech, but also in terms of what is actually in the legislation, what's already been promulgated. Bursary schemes, for example. I know a lot of companies have, third parties have approached companies in terms of bursary schemes where the employer was said, okay, we'll pay an administration fee, or the employer must pay an administration fee, and the company would then, on the employer's behalf, let's say, pay the school fees, or the employer will pay school fees for the kids directly. And that was then treated in terms of taxation as a bursary. So the employers, some of the employers making use of those schemes would then exempt that amount for tax. So they would reclassify remuneration, taxable remuneration, as a bursary. So let's say somebody was earning 20,000, and the school fees of the kid was 2,000, then they would have only taxed the person on 18,000. Now the legislation has changed. Those bursary schemes are not allowed, because as soon as there's and the rule was brought in to say, as soon as there's an element of salary sacrifice, that's the example that I've now given, 20,000, 18,000, then there's no tax exemption. So how will it affect? It will affect us. We need to relook at employment contracts. That will have a direct impact on the employee, obviously, in terms of taxation and his net salary. We need to manage those expectations. Why are we now suddenly taxing the person more? So managing expectations of the employees, and that also has an effect on the costing of the company, because now skills development levies will be more, the UIF contributions will be more. So all I'm saying is, yes, compliance is important, but just don't just rely on a system and think, I don't have to know, what is in the legislation, or just high level what's in the legislation or the changes. So how does it actually translate into changes in my business, and how do I manage those expectations? That's important.
All right, thank you. So there's clearly a relationship here. I mean, if we're talking from an organizational point of view, the people and the technology relationship, but also as an individual, you really need to make sure your house is in order, I think, when you start to speak about that compliance. But I also, I want to build this up and talk about cash flow. right? And Gerhard, I'll start with you. What do you think, businesses can do differently in terms of cash flow, knowing what we know now?
Yeah, I think we always say save, and I mean it's a message from the government as well. They always say, please save more. You need to plan better for future retirement, etc. And if we bring that concept into business, and I said it earlier on, a year ago, no one could have thought that we would go into a hard lockdown, not being able to trade. And a lot of businesses didn't survive it because they just didn't have the cash flow to back it. And luckily, the government brought in programs to support and to try and save jobs. But unfortunately, jobs were lost. It's a fact. We all know the statistics there. But again, managing your finances, whether it's personal or business, I think it put us all into a gear, if we weren't in that gear yet, to say, let's plan properly. Let's make sure we can save costs. I think if you look at companies that's successful and reported growth in the past financial year, there was a multiple of triggers they did. They wanted to save jobs because it's skill. Having skill in an organization, you will be executing on your mandate of the business. But also, let's look at things where we were not saving properly and bring those forward. And again, looking at cash flow, that's key for any organization, which they are managing very tightly. Any organization is thinking twice before they spend. And if they do spend, what is the value? Whether it's a product you buy, whether it's a service you deliver, companies are questioning the value they're going to see. And then also, as I said previously, you need to have insight in data. You cannot steer the ship and make sure you manage expenses if you don't know what the top 10 expenses in your organization is, or what is the top 10 income streams into your organization. Now, again, we break it down to a very simplistic example, but that is what you need to look at. Where can I save? How do I better? Do I know my company well enough to manage those costs? And then what is the competitor doing? Because that's also important to keep an eye on what's happening in the industry. And that's going to guide us, and that's going to make us learn to make sure we become even more successful, or we de-risking our business if we do see a risk.
I'll be shortly opening it up to the panel for, I was just going to say, I was opening it up. I'm going to shortly opening up to the panel. If they have any questions to start preparing themselves, line up for those questions. You can put them in the chat as well. We get ready, but Yolandi, is back to you. You wanted to build up on that. What is it that we should do differently for cash flow?
Just before I get to that, to add to what Gerhard was saying, and I was reading a study that was done recently by Forrester this morning actually, and they asked companies to list the top 3 priorities in terms of their businesses. So the business leaders would have to do that. And the top one before the pandemic which was 62%, was growing revenue or customers. That was a top priority for everyone. Now, after the pandemic, the top one at 72% was reducing costs. And that's what Gerhard was saying, saving, but how do we do that? And we can see a bigger shift in focus actually on the reduction of cost. And just to add to what Gerhard is saying, use AI to pick up trends in terms of customer behavior. We can do those type of things to better project costs. We have so much, the technology can assist us in making decisions before we even have to get to that point in making a decision. So I absolutely agree with what Gerhard has said.
Gerhard, you probably touched on this a bit, and I wanted to, if you are streamlining your business from a technology point of view and keeping some of the things that you mentioned also, what are the key trends? What are we seeing businesses do, especially in a very difficult environment now, what are the steps to agility and streamlining your business that you can use or you would recommend for business?
Yeah, so what we've seen, Brian, over the past 12 months is businesses consistently look at their strategy. They were forced, and again, it's different per industry, but they were forced to consistently innovate. That innovation could be to save, where we maybe in the past didn't have such much or so much pressure on savings. It's also looking at where are we taking our business to. If I'm in manufacturing, for example, how can I secure my value chain? How can I make sure at the end of the day that I deliver a product that's relevant, cost effective, adds value? Again, questioning, maybe there were multiple products I produced, 2 of the 3 are successful, the third one, unfortunately, we're not going to produce anymore. So those questions of focus back into the strategy. Also, I mean, we spoke about compliance and technology, but again, do you have the right technology to support your business processes? And that can be from managing your staff, contracting, making sure you produce a correct pay slip, right through to making sure you get the correct reporting. And for me, running a business, you need to know your numbers. You need to know your staff. You need to know that you can adapt your strategy. And again, the finance leaders will make sure we've got the strategy in place with technology to make sure we're holding the purse tight and we're managing our money properly and we're investing in the right places. HR is very important to make sure we retain our talent. We make sure we have happy employees, if I can call it like that, under very, very difficult circumstances. It's not nice for anyone to go to work and consistently wear a mask. It's something small, but it's got such a big impact on the way you communicate. I mean, people apologizing, I couldn't hear you, I've got a mask on. That's become the norm. So we need to make sure we have happy employees. And then lastly, as I said, consistently looking at the strategy. And from a Sage perspective, we're there to support companies in fulfilling the strategy. We've got the technology, product stacks, as I've spoke about. They know the Sage brand well in South Africa. And please engage with us if you want us to assist you there. And we've got multiple business partners, our service providers, that can execute on making sure you get that value. And it's a win-win recipe. And I think as South Africans, it's a time where we stand together. We learn from one another. We adapt. We support one another. And we need to keep on doing that and make sure for the next years to come. We don't know what the future holds in. Currently, we're in level 1 and things are looking a little bit better. And when we speak to our customers and they say, listen, it's great to be in operations mode and to start executing more, but it's still tough out there. And yes, like I said, if you want to connect with us, you're more than welcome.
Awesome. All right. While we wait to get some questions to start coming in for our Q&A portion of this, Yolandi, Gerhard spoke about managing your purse, right? But I know that the minister did well to steer clear of the elephant in the room, which is also called the public sector wage bill, right? That took quite a big chunk out of the apple that he bit there. What are your thoughts on just that, managing your purse and public spending?
Yeah. So obviously, the fact that there weren't major tax hikes is because we have plans in place. The reduction in spending in terms of the public sector wage bill, that must obviously be executed well. If that is not in place, it will affect our budget, it will affect our cost, and we might not then next year be so lucky to not have major tax hikes. So I think the negotiations that are going on is very important. That could have a massive impact on going forward what the tax implications for us as individuals and companies will be. So execution is always key. We have great plans in place. We must just execute it well. There must be accountability, execution, and if it's not executed well, then we might sit with trouble later on. But I'm also very curious to see what happens with the negotiations now regarding the public sector wage bill, because that will definitely impact all of us.
So you're saying fiscal prudence, right? We really need to keep that
Brian.
absolutely tight. Is there anything that you think the statement fell short? You feel? Was there anything that you were expecting, Yolandi, from the speech that you didn't quite get?
There were just a few things that I think that I wanted a bit more detail on. For example, national health insurance. We know it's coming. I haven't seen much progress in terms or feedback in terms of progress. We know, and I mean, we know that is our end goal, but I would have liked a bit more detail on NHI. And then on unemployment, like Gerhard has mentioned, it's a massive problem. Our current unemployment rate is 32.5%, which jumped from 30.8% in just a quarter. So that is a massive problem in our country, and obviously also puts pressure in terms of taxes, because if we have more employed people, then our tax base would increase. So putting, maybe just putting more pressure on just that small amount of taxpayers. So, and we know we have plans in place. 100 billion was allocated in terms of unemployment, in terms of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. But I would have also wanted a bit more feedback on that. I think the country needed, so we've seen in December, there was a progress report released that seemed like we made good progress. But I think that the public had to hear that we are making progress. There was 800,000 positions or job opportunities that were being, that was the target to being supported. And based on, the state of the nation, it was said that 430,000 of those jobs were already supported. So I think everyone had to hear that in South Africa to give them a bit of hope going forward. We're all working on our unemployment, because not everybody is reading the progress reports, etc. But that is, definitely a problem. But like Gerhard has said, it's a huge responsibility on companies to make sure that their workforce is doing okay. This was tough on everyone during this year. So it's massive pressure from not just the HR department, the finance leaders, etc. And make sure that our employees or workforce is actually doing okay, and they have what they need to be productive and effective, etc. So that is just my take on the budget speech.
Gerhard, you're leaning in.
I think one last thing, and I look back at all the attendees that logged into the session, and maybe I'm going to make an assumption here, but there's a lot of ladies on the call. I assume a lot of them are mothers as well, and having a 8-to-5 job, looking after kids, making sure the household is still ticking, it's admirable. I don't know how these working ladies are getting it right, but please share those secrets, because at the end of the day, it was very tough. If you take it back home, it wasn't easy. I always say, when we virtually on a call and a kid pops up on a screen, we always stop and we wave. But I think those were the challenges we had. And I want to say congratulations to all the ladies on the call and mothers to keeping households together in the past 12 months. because it's really
Thanks, Gerhard. I'll take that. It was difficult. It was hard. I think if the schools were closed for much longer, then I might have killed a kid or two. So,
Gerhard, was there anything that you had in terms of expectation? We always go, looking forward to the budget speech, and we have expectations. Anything from your side?
Yeah, for me, Yolandi covered it. I mean, one of the big things with that we're looking at, and which is important, what she touched on, was unemployment and the plans behind it. And again, as corporates in South Africa, what is our contribution to creating and giving opportunities? We just saw the education results from our matriculants that passed during difficult times as well. What can we do better to make sure we secure them a future to have a job in South Africa? And I think it's a question everyone needs to take internally, and we need to work with government and private sector to make sure we secure that. So for me, it's the plans behind how we can grow a job force. It's very important.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much. I'm looking to see if our attendees or our guests have got any questions that they want to ask directly. Please post them in the chat. We will continue with our conversation as you go. Perhaps we can get Gerhard or Yolandi to answer any of your questions that you may put up in the chat as we have this conversation. Yolandi, GDP, quickly, your overview. Growth hasn't been quite great for South Africa, and does any of these announcements, did it help at all? And where are we?
Brian, I'm so glad I'm not an economist to predict this, but yes, it hasn't been great. But like I said, we have plans in place. Treasury is actually, in the budget speech, it was mentioned that they want to have a surplus in 2024, 2025. So I'm actually curious to see whether that is actually achievable, but I'm sure it is. We have clever people in all places that could predict that. So I'm positive at this point in time. I think we must just, like I said, execute on the plans, and then we'll be okay. Absolutely. But I must also admit, so I'm very glad that I'm not an economist, but I'm also glad in this period of time that I'm not a CFO or finance leader, because I think it was such a difficult year, and to steer a company and promote business in these difficult times couldn't have been easy. So my hat off to all of the finance leaders. Yeah,
tough times indeed. Gerhard, any closing remarks as we kind of near towards the end of our session today? What are your thoughts? And then I'll come back with Yolandi with the same question.
So, as we said earlier on, as a company, you need to evaluate what you want to achieve. Is it achievable? And remember to embrace the technology behind it, whether it's managing your people better, whether it's managing your processes. At the end of the day, it's important to really make sure you start that journey if you haven't started it. If you have started it, again, as I said earlier, revise the strategy and make sure it's applicable, because business change is consistent. It's not static. From a budget point of view, I think what's very important, what Yolandi highlighted, those positives coming in, it gave us all a breather that we saw that we're not paying, or we didn't have an increase in that or on personal taxes, which I think was a major relief for everyone. We hold our breaths on that one. And then lastly, if you need advice, if you want to reach out, anyone on the call, I've known many of these customers, please reach out to us and let's continue the conversation. And Brian, thank you for you hosting the session. It's been brilliant. And I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Gerhard. Yolandi, to you, closing remarks. You still want to talk more about the budget, tax, anything?
I couldn't have said it better than Gerhard, but I think this year has forced us definitely, like you said, to review our strategies, to innovate, to review processes. That doesn't mean that If something has been working well for the past 20 years in a business, it doesn't mean we have to continue with the same process, with the same, we have technology, AI, etc., to make it easier. So definitely review, see where we can better, and obviously if we can assist in any way, we're there for all the clients, non-clients. So you know what, it's just, if this doesn't force us to review everything or the way we work, then nothing will. So, and like I've previously said, you either get on this or you get behind. And I think that is my last takeaway on this.
All right. Thank you very much, Yolandi, for that. And with that, we come to the end of our session. Once again, I want to thank Gerhard Hartman, VP of Small Business from Sage, and Yolandi Esterhuizen, the Director of Product Compliance, for joining us today and giving us the Sage insights on the 2021 budget. A great conversation to have, and I totally enjoyed my time here with you all. And ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Those are your insights for this session. And a great thank you to my hosts. Next up, we'll be running a session with Tech Savvy CEOs Change the Game. That'll be our next session that will come up. But with that, have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.